Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for coming here today. So today we're here to discuss a tragic explosion which occurred on June 28, 2016 on Hickory Drive in the city of Mississauga. The last 6 months have been a very difficult time for the families and who were directly affected by the explosion and for the community at large. Today we are here with Mayor Crombie and our partners, the Office of the Fire Marshal of Ontario and the Mississauga Fire Department, to share with you the outcome of what has been a very comprehensive investigation. We hope that this will provide some answers and some much needed closure to what has closely impacted everyone in this tragic event. So let's begin with just some background. So it was 4:21 p.m. on June 28, 2016, when Peel Regional Police dispatchers began receiving calls regarding an explosion which occurred in the area of Dixie Road in Rathburn in the city of Mississauga. First responders arrived on the scene within minutes of the explosion and began the process of evacuating the immediate area, providing assistance to victims, and closing off access points in the neighborhood. The epicenter of the explosion was found to be the home which stood at 4201 Hickory Drive, which had been completely flattened by the explosion. Several adjacent homes were left only with half their structure still standing, and numerous other homes in the neighborhood suffered serious damage. 2 people within the home were killed. The 2 victims were identified as Robert Nadler and Diane Page. Several others in the area suffered injuries that day, and many residents were uprooted from their homes. In the days that followed, a comprehensive investigation began. A large-scale search of the scene was conducted, which included a systematic removal of all the debris to preserve and collect evidence from the epicenter. The investigation was conducted in collaboration with the Office of the Fire Marshal, the Mississauga Fire Department, Peel Regional Paramedic Services, EnerSource, Enbridge, and the Technical Standards and Safety Authority. The Red Cross also provided excellent community support. So post-mortem examinations of Diane Page and Robert Nadler were conducted, and the cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma, consistent with having been near the epicenter of the explosion. The pathologist was unable to determine the location of either party within the home at the time of the explosion, or to determine their proximity of the source of the ignition. Considering the magnitude of the explosion, all principal partners involved in the investigation played a significant role in gathering evidence. As such, it's taken investigators 6 months to come to their conclusion. So the police investigators identified 4 possible scenarios which may have caused the explosion. Each scenario has been thoroughly investigated. This investigation determined that the explosion was intentional. And given that the supporting evidence, it has ruled out accidental, double murder, or murder-suicide, and investigators have concluded that this was a double suicide. Our hope is that these findings will bring much-needed closure to the community. Now I would like to invite Fire Investigator Kevin Bahor from the Office of the Fire Marshal to the microphone. Kevin?
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you.
I would first like to start off by saying this investigation could not have been completed without the tireless efforts of many organizations. I would like to thank the Mississauga Fire and Emergency Services, Peel Regional Police, Mississauga Paramedic Services, the Technical Standards and Safety Authority, and city officials for providing our team with the equipment, personnel, and support that we needed to complete this investigation. After a thorough scene examination completed by the investigative team of the Office of the Fire Marshal and Emergency Management, which lasted a total of 5 days, the origin of the explosion was determined to be within the basement of the house at 4201 Hickory Drive. At that point, a forensic examination of the natural gas piping within the residence was completed by our office's in-house metallurgist to determine the status of the piping prior to the explosion. This enabled us to determine that the cause of the explosion was the intentional disconnect of the natural gas piping in 2 locations from the hot water tank. This allowed natural gas to free flow into the basement of the residence until it entered its explosive range and was thus ignited, causing the explosion. Due to the low ignition energy required to ignite natural gas, an ignition source could not be isolated. Once the natural gas enters its explosive range any ignition source ranging from electrical circuits to an occupant using an open flame could have ignited the natural gas and thus caused the explosion. Thank you.
Now we will take your questions. Detective Raj Clare and Darren Flamling from the 12th Division Investigation Bureau are the leads on the police investigation, are now available for questions. Darren, Raj.
Can you let us know whether those notes that were found had anything to do with the explosion?
The notes that were found indicated a state of mind which was consistent with somebody suffering some sort of depression, and we're not sure. We can't answer whether those notes had anything to do with the explosion itself.
How did you determine that it was a double suicide? How do you make that determination?
We looked at 4 scenarios, double suicide being one of them, and we investigated the 3 others, and through the process of elimination, we were able to rule out those other 3 scenarios and left with the double suicide scenario.
What was it that made it clear that it was double suicide?
Like I said earlier, all the other scenarios have been ruled out.
Was there, I mean, back to the notes, did they give you any reason to come to that motive?
The notes were part of it. The messages in those notes, along with the fact that we've had witnesses indicate that they were able to smell the gas approximately an hour and a half prior to the explosion, and any individual that was inside the residence, the 2 individuals would have easily been able to smell the gas, and had they wanted to exit, would have had that opportunity.
Were the notes written by 2 different people? Like, were you able to determine, was it just one person who wrote those notes, or was it both homeowners?
The notes that we had were written mostly by one person. I don't believe that there were other notes from anybody else. It was just one individual that wrote the notes, we believe.
And so who do you think it was?
We've sent the notes for handwriting analysis. We were unable to ascertain a certain individual that wrote those notes, but from the context of those notes, it would appear that they were written by Diane Page.
Will people in the surrounding houses be able to seek damages from the deceased's estate?
I can't answer that. That would be up to the individual insurance companies.
Why did the investigation take so long?
Like my colleague was mentioning earlier, like the chief mentioned, it involved quite a few number of agencies. There were tests that had to be done on the items that were seized. Just the number of agencies involved, and the pathology, toxicologist results, all those things take time. And we had to interview over 65 witnesses. And all that takes time. So.
Did the witnesses say anything about the behavior of the couple prior to this explosion? Anything that suggested something was off?
We did find a witness who came across Robert Nadler and asked him how he had been doing, and Robert Nadler said that they were suffering from some sort of cancer, and they didn't have long to live. But we've looked at the toxicologist report, and it indicated that there was no history of any cancer with this individual, or both of individuals.
In your investigation, did it reveal anything or any sort of reason why these people may have wanted to commit suicide? We don't know if there was some sort of repossession of the house or something like that going on.
We can't answer that definitively.
Is there anything to suggest that one of the 2 individuals may have been sort of the instigator of the plan to commit suicide, or did it seem to be both, or do you have information on that?
No, we don't. We don't know which one instigated it.
What have family members belonging to the couple have told you? I know that it's been fairly well publicized that both the brother of Mr. Nadler and a nephew of Mrs. Page said that Nadler was a manipulator of individuals. I mean, was this something where police believed that, to echo my colleague here, that he was the instigator in this? I mean, family members must have told you something.
We spoke with all the family members. We interviewed all the family members. We did investigate that, but there's nothing definitive that we can say that he was the instigator to that. Nothing that led us to believe that he was the instigator.
Okay, it just doesn't make much sense with what's been written in the press. That's all. I mean, they must have, it's not like they tell the press something and you use something different. What are they telling you?
Well, there was obviously some sort of a problem between Robert Nadler and his brother, and it was over the estate of the house. We don't know whether that had anything to do with what happened that day. We can't answer that definitively.
So we know the source of the, where the leaking natural gas was. There was some talk, like at the beginning of the explosion, was, you know, that the gas must have been building up for a certain amount of time to blow up to that extent. Can we say that? Is that part of the investigation or one of the findings, that gas had been building up and then that's why it exploded so much?
Yeah, I can answer that. Yeah. Just due to the level of damage that we faced at that scene, we weren't able to calculate how much pressure was actually going into the house at the time. So we can't definitively state a timeline for how long the natural gas had been building up.
Hours or days? You can't tell at all?
It wouldn't be days, no, but we can't tell hours, minutes. It would all depend on exactly how the pipe was disconnected at the time and then how widely they disconnected it. So that there's too many variables to calculate, and due to the level of damage, we can't make an estimation like that.
So is it possible that the occupants expired from the gas prior to the explosion?
No, they were both alive prior to the explosion, and the toxicologist has confirmed that they were both alive before the house exploded.
Given the amount of gas, if they would have smelled it, they would have both been aware that the gas was involved.
Yes, like I said, we had a witness indicate that they were able to smell the gas an hour and a half prior to the explosion, so these two individuals would have had ample opportunity to exit the residence.
And so were there calls to police about the smell of gas in the neighborhood before this explosion?
No, they were not.
And you're not sure what sparked the blast yet, is that correct?
No, we won't be able to tell just because of the properties of natural gas. It has such a low ignition energy required that anything can pretty much set off in natural gas.
Can you quantify the energy that was released in the explosion, like in joules and in some sort of...
No, again, we can't quantify that just because of the level of damage, so we're not able to make that calculation.
Just what about their families? There's 33 families who are still displaced. They're out of their homes. It's been 6 months now. Just what's the status update on insurance, on rebuild, on when this neighborhood can get back to what it was?
Certainly. First, let me thank all the first responders and for the completeness of the investigation that was done. I want to thank Peel Police and our Ontario Fire Marshal's Office and our own emergency services. We have been working with the residents. There are still 33 families that are displaced. 4 homes have now been demolished. They have received a call that the press conference was underway, so they are aware. They're probably watching. And there will be news posted on the Peel Police bulletin board, so there will be information. And we are setting another community meeting so that all the residents can come together, and once again we can answer all their questions more fully. We'll have representatives from the Insurance Bureau of Canada present when we host that meeting. It won't be this week, probably, just to get everyone together in the week to come. So there are a lot of issues that remain. Many of them are with their insurance companies and the utility companies as well, but we want to thank all those organizations that came together to make this a little easier for those residents that were displaced, which has been 6 months out of their homes to date right now.
Mayor Crombie, how do you feel about the outcome of this investigation, knowing that it was a double suicide that caused so much damage here in the city of Mississauga?
Certainly it is a tragedy for everyone involved. I want to thank the first responders who I think were so brave and acted so professionally. I want to thank the compassion of all the neighbors for assisting their neighbors that have been displaced. And we feel for those 33 families that are still out of their homes, and we're working with them to ensure that they can get back into their homes or help them rebuild their homes at the earliest convenience. It's a tragedy in our neighborhood. Thank you.
So I'm from CBC News. I have a question from a resident, Mike, who's displaced. This question is more about Nadler and the parole responsibility and, a convicted murderer being let off. So the question is, what about parole board responsibility? They let him out. Who was monitoring him?
That, we want to keep it to the investigation for tonight, for today, so I think that's...
Sorry, yeah, I can speak to that. Robert Nadler was convicted. I can confirm he was convicted of a secondary homicide from a 1982 homicide. He served 9 years and then was put on parole. And from all our indications that he was reporting on parole, so he was complying with his parole conditions.
So all of that was fair and therefore...
Yes, it was, yes.
So at that point, sorry, Chief, at that point, Robert Nadler, he wasn't on police radar at all, other than answering your parole officer?
No, I can tell you that we had no contact with Mr. Nadler following that 1982 homicide, so.
And that's all for today. Thank you for coming.
I have a question for Chief Evans, if you don't mind. It's a little off topic, but in light of all the controversy surrounding you, the lawsuits, carding, winning support from the board, I'm just wondering, is it time to resign?
No, it's not. And I think this is really, today is about the tragedy that occurred on Hickory Drive, so I think we're just going to stay focused on what occurred on Hickory Drive.
It's just the first time in a long time that you've been available to the media, and just wondering why you think that your contract should be renewed this year, if you could just speak to that.
You know what, I've got one more year on my contract. I say I've done so much over the last 34 years, serving Peel Region Police and serving the community. And I say I think the contract discussions will occur next year. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.